What's going on, guys? Looks like I'm live. Not 100%. Should be. It's true that I've had quite an unusual life, and a few of you guys in this community have asked me a few times to talk a little bit about that biographical stuff. And I did make one video about my inbred neighbors, but I've been kind of hesitant to do this for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is just that it seems so wildly out of place in the context of the rest of the type of content that I make. And I'm also not really sure how to go about it in terms of like the details of some of these stories. If I was really going to, go into storytelling mode and really tell the stories, it gets pretty bad. So, and I've never really thought about doing it before. Like, what exactly is that process going to be like for me to try to rehash it all from beginning to end, But just to give you an overview, I guess, basically, I was born, what's going on, John? I was born to a 15-year-old father and a 17-year-old mom. And my mother's new boyfriend chased my birth father away. He was a little bit older than her. And he had a lot of anger issues and a lot of drug and alcohol problems and serious self-esteem and self-confidence issues. It was not good that happened, I think. Hopefully he won't watch this, but, it's just really tragic that I had the parents that I did, honestly. And my mom, unfortunately, is no longer with us. She committed suicide in 2016, which is no surprise. I had been hearing about how I was driving her to commit suicide starting when I was probably 4.5 or 5 years old. She had this habit of spelling it so that it would lessen the impact of hearing it somehow. And I was an exceptionally smart kid. So, she thought that she was evading, directly saying that being a single mom with these two kids was what was driving her to need to kill herself. But I understood very well. So we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but so that's the kind of environment that I was brought into, basically. My earliest home was a trailer that was completely covered in cockroaches. I don't remember it at all, but I know my father was hospitalized with a baby roach in his ear. Once when I was a kid, I heard that story quite a lot. And so, I was going to do an overview. So basically, I went from that to the only inbred white trash PCP smoking, 3 murders by the time I was in 6th grade on a street with 14 houses or something, less probably. It was literally one block. The lead singer from Guar lived on the far corner, which was kind of the claim to fame of Pokel Drive, I guess. He was the only person that really managed to beat me up when I was a teenager in that neighborhood, without help from a large group of sometimes adults. People's uncles and stuff would jump in if I was winning a fight. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. I went from that. That neighborhood was surrounded by gentrification, right? So there were rich people all around. And in order to escape that, I ended up in Washington, DC, where I became a teenage coke dealer, dating a girl whose father was a lawyer for the Kennedys and had gotten himself in some tremendous trouble, attempted assassinations. They suspect the CIA, but, everyone's sitting around at dinner one time in Fairfax County and bullets come flying through the window and ricochet off the china and stuff. Ted Cruz tried to touch my junk when I was 17 in 1998 on Capitol Hill while buying cocaine from me and my other teenage friend, and asked us if we could get him young boys. And eventually we'll go through this stuff in a little bit more detail. I'm just trying to give you an overview here. So my whole objective being a drug dealer in the city was to get away from the East Coast and go out to California. So first I made it to Colorado, where I lived for about 10 years in the mountains, and that was really good. That gave me some time to kind of sit up in the hills and get some thinking done. That's where all the Phoenix process video stuff happened. All the synchronicities started really snowballing and all that. And from there, I ended up in Northern California, where I got involved in the outlaw marijuana scene until by the time I had the money to have my own garden, the price tanked and everything fell apart. And my partners robbed me, and I ended up in Ecuador, which is where I am today. So that's the overview. I guess let's rewind back to Pocal Drive, because that's really kind of my earliest memories and where the shit really started to hit the fan. My parents were so poor and dysfunctional that we did not have running water in our house. Now, this was like 1986, 1985. There were bullet holes in the window of my bedroom. There was a little girl that had been murdered in my room accidentally. They burned the house down trying to kill the adults that lived there, and the only person they ended up killing was the little girl. The bedroom was rebuilt. Interestingly, I, one night falling asleep, perceived the sound of sobbing and the silhouette of a girl in the closet. My friend later told me, without, I didn't say anything about it to him. He told me that he had experienced that, spending the night on the floor in that room. And then later I found out that this little girl had actually died in there. So that was pretty weird. The neighborhood was so dangerous that the police would come, and these inbred rednecks would throw bottles at the cops and shoot at them even. So, you could call the police and there was a good chance that no one was coming to help you. Our toilet was outside. I remember going in there and there would be like giant, black rat snakes and spiders, black widow spiders. I have had an immune issue my entire life, and it's probably because after a few years of living there, we had our well water tested, and it had feces and concrete in unacceptable levels. By the way, you guys, do me a favor and hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, where you can join my secret streams that have absolutely nothing to do with any of the kind of stuff I'm talking about in this stream. But I'm definitely hard shadow banned, man. The last couple of shorts that I posted got like 14 views, popular topics, polished videos, 9,000 subs. They're burying my stuff. So I need you guys, if you support me in my mission, and I am trying to do good things in the world for sure. So, we appreciate your support. There's options in the chat and the Patreon and all that. So, also follow the music channel. I almost finished tabbing out this Jerry Garcia solo. It's got reaction videos, my own music eventually, and tabs and lessons and all kinds of stuff. So check that out. So where were we in this nightmarish tale? Yeah, I mean, the cops would sometimes not even come. And I was kind of an outcast because my mother felt like we weren't really white trash. And definitely compared to the people around us, we were not white trash. They would feed gunpowder to their pit bulls. So it was dangerous to go for walks in the woods because twice I got surrounded by this pack of dogs that were intentionally raised to be murderously mean. We would lose all of our cats. Like, I would be going to sleep at night and I would hear the cats getting ripped to shred in the front yards by these monstrous pit bulls. And oddly, they were led by a German Shepherd. And one time I encountered them, I reached down to pick up an arrowhead walking through the woods, and I came up and I was nose to nose with the alpha German Shepherd. And I looked around and I saw the pit bulls, and they were all circled around me. And I thought, well, it's been good, 7 years or whatever. And they just walked away. I didn't have any problems, but that kind of stuff was pretty normal. At the age of probably 7 or 6 or something, pretty young because I had a babysitter, I saw my babysitter walking down the street with a .22 caliber pistol, shooting at people that were beating her brother with a lead pipe. Bobby Innes, he ended up pretty much gutting a 18-year-old honor roll football scholarship kid in the Testermans who were two doors down in their yard a little while after. Unfortunately, I guess those guys didn't finish the job with the lead pipe. Somehow he only got 1 to 10 years. Really blew my mind. But I actually saw the aftermath of that. I was riding my bicycle down to the bus stop, or what would have been the bus stop in the morning, and the patriarch, I guess, the grandpa of the family, was stuffing towels into this kid that was bleeding out, into the kid that was bleeding out in the yard. And by the way, you guys, definitely hope, I'm sure you guys are all mature enough not to find any of all of this an attempt at glorifying any of this at all. When I'm said that I'm glad that I lived outside of society, it did give me a unique perspective, but I'm certainly not happy about any of the rest of this stuff. But yeah, so that kid unfortunately died, and that was the first time I rolled up on one of these situations. The first homicide that I saw, actually, I was quite a bit younger than that. My father, he wasn't really my father, which I wouldn't find out until I was 11, right? There's some nice Jerry Springer elements to the story as well. But holy crap, man. So, I just got a message that the internet's not good. Yeah, no, it was definitely a German Shepherd. I had a German Shepherd. I know what a German Shepherd is, and that's what I thought too. Like, how is this dog the alpha? But it was. The German Shepherd was the alpha, and yet that's what you would think, but that's not what happened. And this is going to get bad, guys, so I'm just telling you, like, I'm going to tell these stories without any filter, and this one's bad. So if you have a weak stomach or you don't want to hear this stuff, then this is your opportunity to check out. But this is probably the worst one, honestly. So my dad wanted to be a biker, but he wasn't really a biker. He just wanted to be a biker. He could never afford a bike, but his friends were all pretty scary. Ted Nye, who was one of the scariest of them, they found bodies under his house when they demolished it. He was already dead, but when they demolished his house, they found bodies under it. They used to cook PCP in these big barrels behind his house, and it would eat through the barrels. And they had to keep changing these big, rusty barrels that they were mixing this PCP in. And then they're shooting this stuff, Another one of my dad's friends was named Bones, because he had like no meat on his body from all the tweaking and, 3 teeth and that whole thing. Ted Nye actually had "fuck you" tattooed across his like face right here. One time they dressed him up in drag while he was sleeping. They put lipstick and shit on him, and they went into the 7-Eleven, and everyone started laughing at him, and he just demolished, like, through the cash register, through the beer cooler, and, just smashed this. These guys were not right, It was really, really violent, really crazy. I can remember being a toddler, and they thought that it was good to, like, rough me up. So they would like grab me by the feet and dunk my head in a mud puddle, but they'd be so fucked up that they'd be beating my head into the gravel underneath of the top of the, under the puddle, because they can't see and don't realize they're like crunching my vertebrae into the ground. But we were at a outlaw barbecue. The gang was called, the club, the One Percenter Club, was called, it's not the Banditos, wasn't the Hells Angels, the Pagans. And these guys were a really, 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 really bad group of people. Some of them turned out to be pedos later on down the line, which is not something that is generally smiled upon in the biker gang community. But they were bad. And so in the middle of the festivities, somebody's girlfriend shows up, or no, the girl was there. This guy shows up, and he goes to hug this girl, and her boyfriend sees it, walks over without saying a word, grabs the girl by the back of the head, puts her face around a curve so her mouth is open, steps on the back of her head, kills her dead. It turned out to be a cousin that she hadn't seen in, a decade or something. So that's the kind of stuff that would happen. Sometimes, and you just never knew, you never knew when shit was just gonna pop off like that. And I think I started to, I think the emotions behind this has made the stream a little bit disconnected so far. So I'm sorry if I'm jumping all over the place, but it's intense to go back and revisit this stuff and talk about it. And again, part of the reason I'm doing it is that, the reason I'm good at what I do now is because I've been through all this stuff, and it has, and I think it's also kind of unusual that somebody with, a relatively high IQ and the motivation to self-educate to the extent that I have comes from this kind of background. So it's kind of a unique set of circumstances from what I can tell. And it's given me the ability to be a really good ayahuasca facilitator and a really good, life coach. I hate using that word, but I do basically serve that role for people. And all this stuff that I'm talking about is why I'm so good at it. And it also shows you that somebody that can go through the kind of history, the kind of past that I had, that you really can put yourself together eventually using psychedelics and, techniques. It took me a long time, and it's really, really unfortunate, a lot of the stuff that happened along the way. But I've definitely, come a really long way compared to where I was when I was 21 years old. I was dangerous to pretty much anyone. That's how I was programmed from the time that I was a child, that your value was determined by how afraid of you people were. When I was a little kid, my dad told me, I'm not going to use the exact language that he did because YouTube would probably delete me. But you could grow up to be gay or a serial killer or even an inward lover. And I could live with that. But if you become a cop or a judge or a fucking lawyer, you know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of influence that I had that, whereas a normal kid might have the objective of out-achieving their father, my situation was more like out badassing him or something. And I did that by the time I was like 15. I didn't realize it, but looking back, I definitely left him in the dust before I could drive, in just the sense of the scale of the things that I did. In fact, when I was a teenager, when I was 15 years old, I was charged with an 848, and it was the worst drug charge. Well, actually, it was the worst, what is it called? Not like racketeering, but like organized crime. The highest organized crime charge that any juvenile in the history of the justice system had ever been charged with. An 848, conspiracy to run a continual criminal enterprise. And it wasn't anything as bad as that sounds. It just had to do with LSD and other things. But yeah, so this story blows up pretty quick. Because it was really a perfect storm of circumstances. So this neighborhood that I'm talking about, where we had all these inbreds, these people are illiterate. Like, my mom worked at a nursery down the road from our house, and one of our neighbors came in one time, and he had a check, and his name was Butch Jenkins. I don't even care. He's dead. I'm sometimes I feel like I shouldn't say their names, but I'm gonna. Butch Jenkins, of course, Butch Jenkins. And he was the one feeding the gunpowder to the pitbulls. He comes into the nursery, and he's got this check, and he says, "Ma'am, I can't read nor write, so I'm gonna need you to fill it out for me." So he literally, like, my mom has to sign it and write in his name, and it was that bad. It was that bad. They were literally inbred. Like, I'm not even kidding about that. Eventually, I started to put it together because I was like, wait a minute, Joey, you're a Testerman and an Innis, and the Innises are also the cousins of the Testermans. And wait a minute, you're all fucking inbred. But so, yeah, I don't know. This is getting really scattered because I'm trying to give like a complete picture, and it's really difficult because there's just so many elements, all the lunacy happening at home. While we're on the subject, I guess my mom was extremely prone to crazy fits of anger. Now that I'm older, I realize she had narcissistic personality disorder. She had been seriously molested and abused as a child. And so she was batshit nuts, and totally antisocial, both of my parents. Like if my dad met anyone, he would just be hostile towards them. So we had no friends, we had no family. It's not like I had like a normal uncle or some family friend that was normal. There was nothing normal anywhere in my orbit, ever. Like not a shred of normalcy. And because we were the one broke down, broke ass, inbred neighborhood in Fairfax County, which was the second wealthiest county per capita in the United States, we were surrounded by rich people, I know I've told this story before on this channel, but it's crazy. The girl down the street just a couple miles away, we had show and tell, and they went around the circle, and the girl down the road from the rich neighborhood had Reagan and Schwarzenegger over for dinner, which tells you something about how long they groom these people before they put them in political office. I think Reagan was running for president probably when I was in second grade, because that's when this happened. So he wasn't yet president, and Schwarzenegger was not yet famous, as far as I know. I'd have to check on that, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't, maybe barely famous yet. So that, over the years has struck me as very, very odd that the two of them were at this girl's house having dinner in Virginia, right outside of Washington, DC, in like 1986 or something like that. Really weird, right? But that was her picture, she's like, yeah, this is my show. And the girl from my neighborhood was like, my mamaw shot my papaw right in the ass last night. And the guy that she was talking about that got shot in the ass was the guy that was stuffing the towels into the kid that was dying. Same folks, right? So I was really alienated at school, because I was wearing thrift shop clothes. They would be talking about their ski trips in Colorado. And to me, in my mind, one of the worst things about being that poor is that you believe that the things that like middle-class people do are like off limits to you permanently. I never thought that I would go to Colorado, in like second and third grade. I thought of it as like this, alien place where lucky rich people got to go. I mean, we literally never traveled more than 3.5 hours away from home the entire time I was a kid. We went to Virginia Beach like twice. There was literally no such thing as a vacation. No computers in the house, right? No television. No, there was a TV, but luckily we didn't. That's one thing I'm grateful for. We didn't watch it. But yeah, so really, really bad alienation and really, really severe abuse at home. And so my response to that, I guess, was that I had to control my environment. And because my mom acted like she was better than the neighbors, she didn't really go outside, so they couldn't attack her. So they started jumping me and my brother, but mostly me because I was a lot bigger when I was walking to school, or if I tried to go, out to the rich neighborhood up the road because they were a little bit smarter. So I identified with them more, and I would try to go to the better neighborhood to go hang out with those kids. But I usually wouldn't make it without getting in a fight. So eventually my mom signed me up for martial arts, and I got really lucky in that regard. I happened to live near a guy named Master Kwan, who was one of a kind. He studied Kung Fu in the Shaolin Temple in silence for 15 years. And then when he left the temple, he traveled around the world studying under different martial arts masters. So he had 4th, 5th, 6th, up to 10th degree black belt in everything. It's this huge list of mixed martial arts way before it was a thing. He could, they would blindfold him, and he would come into the room, and they would be hanging, a cinder block, an apple, a Coke can, 5 objects from the ceiling. He's blindfolded, and he would jump up in the air and break them all with kicks before he hit the ground again, blindfolded. He could throw a credit card into the wall. If you were wearing a jacket, he could beat the crap out of you with it without even touching you. I mean, it was just completely insane. There's still videos of him you can find online at like the DC Armory. Like when he broke the world record of concrete blocks that broken with his head. It was like 80 feet tall or something, like this huge ladder. He's like way up in the air. And I think for show, the first time he acted like he had knocked himself out. Nothing broke, so I don't think it was real. And then he broke it all. And then he would also put pins through his arms, and pick up like these buckets, barrels full of sand, and like stand on broken glass and kick something and break it while standing on the glass. All this crazy shit. I mean, this guy's scar tissue on his hands and knuckles was like this gigantic wad of, I've never seen anything like this. It was completely insane. So after just a few months of that, I started fucking these kids up, and that didn't help either, because their 30-year-old uncle, if I started to win a fight, would just jump in. And I mean, I was nearly hospitalized many, many times because, it would start out, they were all inbred, right? So I would get in a fight with one kid, and then the other kids would get involved, but I might, break 2 of their noses, and, the third kid might've been a girl and kick her in the chest. She rolls to the ditch. I mean, that actually happened, and don't hit girls, but when there's 4 people and only half of them are female, what do? You know what I mean? Not much of an option left for you in those kinds of circumstances. But yeah, the 30-year-old uncle would jump in and put me in a full Nelson, and, so I leveled up. In high school, since we were right on the edge of Washington, DC, we were only about 20 minutes outside of the ghettos. And some of these guys in the ghetto figured out that high school kids would buy drugs. And because, everyone but me basically had rich parents, there was plenty of money. These kids had massive allowances. Some of them had probably, I don't know about trust funds at that age, but definitely, driving around in BMWs, and just ridiculous. I mean, their parents would buy them anything. So they would have, drug dealer rims, lowered BMW, like, insane sound systems. And they were really just rich kids. But that didn't mean that we didn't have guns and cocaine and, just everything you can imagine. Really crazy stuff happened because of our proximity to the inner city. And like I said, these guys in the ghetto started actually showing up at our high school. Eric Yule, who actually ended up, I found out a few years ago, he went to a club in Northeast DC called Tracks, and he was in the club and somebody said something to him and he shot him twice in the chest, and then he just went outside and threw his gun in the Anacostia River, and then went back into the club like it was not going to be a problem or something. Like he thought if he got rid of the weapon, that he wouldn't go to jail. But that guy became almost like a mentor to me at like 15 or 16. Right. And there was another guy named Raz, whose father was a cop, that ended up killing a cop for absolutely no reason. I mean, these are kids, you guys. We were teenagers, but we weren't like normal kids. We were completely unhinged. I mean, there were shootouts in the suburbs, like, $250,000 houses, and there's bullets, coming through the second floor window. We're diving on the floor in like yuppie neighborhoods, because things had gotten so completely out of control. And part of how that happened, actually, was because Raz's dad was a cop. He was working in narcotics, and he would sometimes take a nap in the middle of the day. He had a briefcase. I don't know if he had, this is back in the day, so there were like hard disks and floppy disks still. And I think what I remember is that he had written the access codes to the files on the disks. So however this happened, Raz got into them, and there were lists of informants with the addresses and all the information about these drug dealers. So we're like, if we take these lists of, informants to these drug dealers, they're going to give us tons of stuff, money, drugs, all this stuff, guns. And so we leveled up pretty hard. And it was extremely stupid because all of those people were already being watched. So it wasn't long before we were all on the radar as well, because, we were a little bit stupid, I guess, and we didn't think about the fact that, I guess it was greed or something, but we didn't think about the fact that all of these people were already being surveilled, that we were going to go and warn. And we 100% got people killed by giving these drug dealers that information. I know that for absolute certainty. And it also resulted in, like, the first time I saw cocaine, it was a lot of it. It was an awful lot of it. And other stuff happened. I had a friend that had Tourette's, and apparently sometimes one of the consequences of having Tourette's is that you don't have a real sense of consequence. At least that's what his brother told me about it, and it certainly seemed true because Kevin, he committed suicide by pocket knife, in Loudoun County, where we used to actually take grenades and automatic weapons and blow up the cars in this deserted junkyard. He ended up killing himself out there. And we got those weapons because Kevin found some guys that worked at the armory in Richmond that were crackheads, and we started trading them. We gave them a 1/4 pound of pot for 4 grenades one time, and we already had like a Mac 11, and don't get me wrong, we weren't out gangbanging. Like, we were just kind of like psychedelic kids. It was weird. Me and my closest friends were, some of the first people to find out about Terrence McKenna. Some of us went to Dead shows. Some of us, I was reading Tim Leary by 7th grade and Huxley. So it was like I had this dual personality. And really it goes back even further than that. I was thinking today, I don't know what happened, but I saw this grasshopper, and I remembered being like 6, 7 years old. And this voice in my head when I saw this grasshopper was like, you see that grasshopper right there? Before it's all over with, you're going to have lived a life seeing through the eyes of every single organism that has ever lived, ever will lived. And I'm like, what, you mean like every ant and every colony and every person and it was like, you just have no idea. But before it's all over with, you will have lived an entire lifetime from every possible perspective in the universe. And I was like 6 or 7 thinking like that. And I've always been like that, My mom, one time when I was like 7 years old, mentioned Gnostics, and I just sat up and I was like, what is a Gnostic? And she said, well, they're people that believe you don't need a church or a God or not God, but a church or a mediator or a preacher or whatever. And I remember just going out on a porch and like looking up at the sky like, holy shit, I'm a Gnostic. I had no way of knowing how significant that would be later on in my life, So I don't think I've really mentioned that I had this profound connection to all of that stuff from early childhood, like weirdly. I was also borderline genius, I guess. I was taken out of normal classes and put in gifted and talented. So I was in like special classes for advanced kids. But I was so fucked up from my, home life that I would just like lose it in class and start screaming, and they'd have to drag me to the principal's office, for absolutely no reason, just lose my mind all of a sudden. So it was just a really crazy, bunch of circumstances. I remember also in 7th grade, or aptitude tests, they called me into the office and they're like, you scored in the top 1% in a couple of categories. Top 1%. Like, you understand what that means? Of course I didn't care, but I'm just trying to give you guys an idea of the kind of person that was in these situations. It's not like I was like some, idiot gangbanger that didn't have any awareness or something. It was not like that at all. But it's like the conditioning of being brought up by outlaws, and in this circumstance where if people weren't afraid of me, I wasn't safe. And the only way to be safe was to make everyone so afraid of me that nobody would fuck with me, you know? So it was a really confusing juxtaposition of, you know, contradictory elements for me to have to try to live with. But yeah, so some of those connections in my friend's briefcase turned out to be extremely big. And so at one point, we got the address of a guy named Farrell Edmonds, who was about 4'9", and he was a drag queen. And we went up to DC and rang his doorbell. And we went in and we had the paperwork from Raz's dad, and we gave it to him, and he looked it over. And I don't think I can say exactly what happened, but there was a person in that room that didn't come out of that room because he was on that list. And that was some crazy shit to see without flinching. That guy was, crosshairs took him out the frame, to put it bluntly. And when Farrell Edmonds was busted, he was declared the biggest cocaine dealer in the domestic United States. So outside of, you know, cartel leaders. And they found over $100 million in cash stuffed into his couch and his walls. And so this is the kind of people that, you know, I was 15 years old, I think, maybe 16, when all that happened. And then I got involved with some kids that knew a teacher at Robinson High School. You guys can check this out. There's still the LSD that was taken out of my locker actually ended up on the front cover of Newsweek with the cop that busted it, fanning it out. I was at my grandmother's house and I just found that in the garage, and I was like, man, this is just. I had no idea about that, obviously. But a teacher had taught some kids to make LSD in the chemistry department with the chemistry class. And there were other teachers involved and stuff. And so we had this massive LSD connection. One of us actually got busted around that time. And he had the misfortune of being 18 years old. And he just got out of prison 2020, I think. So talk about narrow misses too. I mean, it's incredible that I'm alive. And you guys, bear in mind that I've only been giving you like a small overview of all this, and I'm only up to the point where I'm in like, midway through high school age, at least. So I had LSD at school, and someone ratted me out. And it was around the time that Raz finally got caught for killing a cop. Because what happened was, two things happened that started really bringing the heat down on us. First, I don't know how long you guys have been watching, but I mentioned a guy from the ghetto in DC that had shot the guy in the club and ended up in Lorton for the rest of his life. Eric Ewell. There was a kid named Winifred that just talked too much. And we were driving down the road, they were driving down the road. And Winifred was just talking about how he could get everyone's cell phones, which were brand new. Like no one had them. No one could afford them. They were things lawyers had, and they were gigantic. The first one I had was like that big. It looked like one of those like radio boxes that the military would use. And saying he could get his helicopter rides. I was just trying to impress the gangsters. You know what I mean? We were like legends. People were terrified of us. We had all kinds of everything. And it just, the poor kid was just trying to impress us. And Eric got sick of him running his mouth one day and shot him in the head and threw him out of the car into a creek. And the next day in school, I remember there was a moment of silence for Winifred. And that same year, I was on the honor roll all of a sudden, and I thought that it was because I had started taking acid in school that I had just started to get really good grades. But it actually came out in the newspaper that the teachers there were so afraid of us that they said they were just passing us all with good grades, all these certain kids, because they didn't want to get killed. And they were afraid to cross any of us. I mean, it was that crazy. So Raz, the legend anyways, is that he got pulled over for nothing. Like, it was going to be a ticket. The cop wasn't going to do anything to him. He just went back to his car to go write a ticket, came back, gave him the ticket, and Raz took his head off with a double barrel 12 gauge. And so eventually, the teacher got busted in the LSD ring. Raz got arrested for the police homicide. People started going down all around me. And luckily, I only had a couple of hits of LSD for personal use when I got busted. But because I was connected to this group of people, when they came for me, man, it was crazy. I was tripping, and I was out playing softball, and I remember I was up to bat, and I see this army. There's like a helicopter and an army of cops and the principal and all these. I knew, like, I was like, there is nobody else. There's nobody else in this school that they would be coming for like that. And so they came and got me, and they searched my locker, and I had the acid hidden in a strap on my backpack. And yeah, so I got busted. But somehow there was like a breakdown in communication. They took me to the police station, and they started asking me about Raz, and they started asking me about Eric Yule, and they started asking me about, all my other friends and people, and I just wouldn't tell them anything. They brought this like sleazy looking dude in, like, mullet, and just obviously a cop, and they're like, do you think they would accept this guy if we sent him in with you to, and I'm like, I'm looking at him, I'm like, I'm 15 years old, you guys got me with like 2 hits of LSD. I don't care. I'm not going to rat them out, get myself killed, maybe, and bring hell on my family. I'd grown up around bikers and criminals. I was not stupid. Like, so I wouldn't do it. And they released me, but I wasn't supposed to be released, even though I was a juvenile. They were supposed to hand me over to the DEA, and somehow it didn't happen, and I ended up getting out of there. So when I got home, my mom flipped out, so I ran away from home. And I guess I stopped and talked to a girl in one of the neighborhoods or something, and she told the cops that I had a gun. So I was on the run basically for about a week, I guess, and I had no idea that there was like a statewide manhunt. There were helicopters. There were, armies of cops. They believed I was armed, so I was in danger. Just absolutely insane. And so finally, I guess I got hungry or something, and I just my friends were all locked up. I didn't know what to do or where to go, and I eventually just called my mom and asked her to pick me up at like the Kmart or something. And she came and picked me up, but as we were driving away, we got surrounded by like a dozen cop cars, shotguns drawn all around us, yanked me out of the car. My mom screaming, absolutely terrified because they were told that I was heavily armed, and my friends were seriously dangerous. I was not really that dangerous. I would fight if I had to, and I definitely projected that. But I really, at heart, just wanted to be a bookworm. It was just a complex psychological disposition that I also felt like I had to be this scary lunatic. I guess. So then I find out that I've actually been charged with conspiracy to run a continual criminal enterprise. They had gone to my grandmother's house in Vienna, where I had a bunch of other stuff stashed, semi-automatic Tech 9, a jar of PCP, just all kinds of other stuff. So now I had real problems. But they mishandled all the evidence, so that by the time I ended up in court, I was only charged with possession of LSD. And they ended up, the prosecutor was saying, "You don't understand, Your Honor. He looks like a sort of normal 15-year-old kid, but we've never seen anything like this in his group of friends. Like, this is not a normal kid. He needs to go to jail." And I think what they really wanted was to be able to put pressure on me so I would talk about all the people that I knew about. Because they probably knew I had witnessed other stuff because of the, informants that we had access to that information and all of that. But the judge, asked me if I had anything to say for myself, and it was a woman. And I was like, "Your Honor, I started reading books by Timothy Leary when I was like 12 years old, and I just became really fascinated with the potential for mind expansion that is offered by psychedelics. And, I come from a really rough background, and I feel like these, substances can be very therapeutic." And she blushed and dismissed all of this crap that the prosecutor was saying, like, 848, try him as an adult, continual criminal enterprise, all this crazy shit. And they suspended my license for 6 months, even though I was 15 years old and couldn't even get a driver's license. So I walked out of there. And the original charges were insane, like RICO, basically, at 15. RICO, possession of an unlawful firearm, tons of cash, several different types of drugs, and suspected of all sorts of other stuff. I mean, Kevin, the guy with Tourette's that I was talking about earlier, that guy, it's not really funny in a way, but his stuff was so legendary, the antics this guy got up to, that when I started traveling across the United States later on, like, people had heard of him. Like random people I ran into were like, "Whoa, Kevin Bell, like, you knew that guy?" It was just insane. He, at one point, he got super drunk, and he decided he wanted to rob 7-Eleven for their beer. Not for money or anything. He just wanted beer, and he didn't have any money. So he got a sawed-off shotgun, put on a ski mask, and he goes down to the 7-Eleven to rob the 7-Eleven, and he shoots. There's a cop car, and he gets mad because there's a cop at 7-Eleven. So he shoots the cop car in the gas tank. Gas tank explodes. Cop car lights on fire. Kevin hides in a doghouse for the next 3 days with the shotgun, like, in there, like, terrified that they're going to come and find him. Stuff like that was almost like a daily. We were just completely unhinged, And of course, the cops knew that most of this terror that was happening in Fairfax County at that time was us. But do you think I stayed out of trouble after all that? No way, man. No way. And, one of the reasons I hesitated to tell these stories is just the simple fact that the sheer volume of it, when combined with all of the synchronicity stories and stuff, I really, it's just hard to believe that so much shit could happen to one person. And, it is all true, but I'm very much aware of how outlandish, because you guys haven't heard how outlandish it gets. It gets way crazier than this when I went to DC. Way, way crazier in some ways. Just the what is it, like the stature, I guess? Is that the right word of the people that I ended up getting involved with there were also on a tier that most people would only see in the movies. part of it is just being in that area and having absolutely no fear, I guess. And also being intelligent. I don't know. I don't know how bad luck. I don't know how to explain it, but it never toned down really until the last 6 or 8 years being in Ecuador. And when I was in California and Colorado, I did tone way down, but it was still pretty wild, but by the time I had left Virginia, I was no longer in any kind of dangerous, angry state of mind. And by the way, I credit mushrooms with that. And eventually, I was able to fix basically what I later recognized to be bipolar disorder. Not bipolar, I'm sorry. Antisocial, what is it called? Antisocial. You're like one step away from being psychotic. I don't know why I'm having a hard time. Antisocial personality disorder? Is that what it is? Pretty sure that's it. But I did figure out exactly what they would have labeled me with at one point. And it was bad. It was pretty bad when I was around 21 or so. But what happened, I guess, is that incrementally, mushrooms in particular, not that I don't think LSD or ayahuasca could have done this, but it just happened to be that I was growing mushrooms in my closet most of the time throughout my late teens and early 20s. And that's how I stopped trying to control people, and I stopped losing my temper to the point where I was unsafe. And, now that I understand more about those kind of conditions and the level of trauma that I had, I am like more acutely aware of how incredible it is that a compound can do something like that for someone, because generally they would say it's not really reversible, I was, it's like I was super cool, but once you hit a certain rage or hit certain buttons, there were really no limits to what could happen. I could be absolutely terrifying. But I was really able to work through all that on my own using psychedelics to the point where it's not even really, there's no evidence of it in my life for quite some time now, decade or so. Jesus, man, I can't believe we've only made it to like high school. But so, what time is it too? I'm supposed to watch all right, I got a little bit more time. When does the movie come out? Yeah, I know, man. It's just completely nuts. And like I said, the famous people haven't even entered the picture yet. Ted Cruz is about to enter the picture. Ted Cruz, Danny Carey, and Phil Lesh all make cameos before this is over in the weirdest ways possible, of course. Some of those stories you guys have probably already heard. But yeah, so next phase of all this, my family moved away from Washington, DC. And, oh, wait. I haven't even gotten to the part where I went to DC yet, have I? Shit, man. I can't believe this was all over by the time I was like 18 or 19. Like all this shit was already behind me and it was just on to my adult life. Like I wasn't even driving. Most of the shit that I've told you guys happened before driving age. And I didn't tell you about the body I found in a pond with the boot sticking out, or, you know what I mean? There was a lot more. Almost got picked up by a serial killer that ended up getting 2 of my friends one time when I was a runaway. He was pretending to have a broken arm, and he asked me if I wanted to go try a little sex, and when I said no, he said fine, and he took his arm out of the sling and drove away. And eventually he ended up, unfortunately, getting 2 of the girls from my high school, and they caught him just a few years ago. A girl escaped. Just really crazy, man. Really, really crazy. So I learned to play the guitar during all of this. So anyways, after that episode, I guess, I can't remember exactly what precipitated this, but oh yeah, okay. So we moved away from the DC area. We went to Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is Spotsylvania. It's like a Civil War battlefield town sort of affair, and it was much more low key, So I was suddenly like a big fish in a small pond. These kids didn't know what to make of me because I just had a whole different level of energy than these like redneck stoner kids, running around, out in these fields trying to explain Timothy Leary to these redneck wigger kids and stuff. Am I allowed to use that word? That some word sounds like it's probably going to get me canceled as it's coming out of my mouth, but you know what I mean? Like that's how these like low income redneck kids are. So we went down to Fredericksburg, and my mom basically, because I quit school, my mom was like, you have to join the military or you have to get a job. So I was like, I'm not joining the fucking military. And I got a job at Frank's Nursery, and I got a moped, and I was driving that moped to work and back. And one night I was driving along, and all of a sudden there was a smashing sound, and I was flying through the air for quite a while, and then I hit the ground and skidded. And it's weird. It's like while I was in the air, everything went in slow motion, and then when I hit the ground, all of a sudden I understood what was happening, and it all started happening fast again. But I still have a scar from that, I think, on my hand here. And my mom I chained the moped to a tree, and then I went home. I didn't go to the hospital. I didn't sue the lady. I guess the cop said it was my fault somehow, even though I got rear-ended. They just liked her better. I think she was like a upper middle class college girl, and I was like this long-haired teenager stoner kid. So they just didn't want to cause her any problems, put it on me. And my mom sent my stepfather to go and steal the moped and take it to the dump so I couldn't get it fixed and continue to go to work, which would force me into the military. So I joined the National Guard, the Army National Guard. And I didn't get a haircut. The drill sergeant you just go there. It's not like the military where you don't go to boot camp right away. We started going to drills on the weekends. And you're supposed to get your own haircut. So I didn't know my right from left, right? I didn't drive and I didn't care. I still have that kind of issue where if something is not absolutely relevant to me, I don't care. Like it has to be important or I don't care. It's one of my few neuroses. If people are upset or concerned about things that seem trivial to me, it pisses me off. It's the one thing that's still in my life I have to really watch my reactions because it doesn't really make sense. You know what I mean? But I'm still like that. If something isn't super directly relevant, I just don't care. And so it wasn't relevant to me really. I didn't, I knew where I was going most of the time. I never thought about it. It's a weird thing, but I really kept getting it wrong during the drills. He's like, left, and I would turn right. And he would say, right, and I would turn left. And he looked just like the Bugs Bunny. Have you ever seen that Bugs Bunny drill sergeant with the tiny little waist and the big giant chest and the bald head and the hat and shit? I still had long hair and shit, and he's like, God damn it, Private Donnelly. He took me out into the outside to yell at me all the time, get outside, Private Donnelly. If I wasn't a man of God, nose to nose with me. But I knew it's 1990, 6, 7 or something. And I knew he couldn't hit me or anything. And he's like, if I wasn't a man of God, I would tear your fucking head off and shit down your throat, Private Donnelly. What the hell's wrong with you? Blah, 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 blah. And then so they hated me. But after 2 weeks or so only, I had taken the ASVAB. And they called me into the officer's office. It's so long ago, I don't remember what all this shit is called, but they called me into the officer's, the highest ranking officer's office there. And he said, have a seat, Private Donnelly. And he was red as hell in the face, but he wasn't mad. So I was confused. I was like, man, this is weird energy all of a sudden. And he says, As much as it pains me to have to tell you this, Private Donnelly, you scored very, very high on the ASVAB. Much higher than me. And for him to have to say that to this kid with long hair that didn't know his left from right, I mean, it was just such a slam dunk fucking victory. I couldn't believe it, dude. It was like just one of the greatest moments ever. And that drill sergeant was standing behind me. So he heard it too, and his eyes bug out of his head. You know, what the fuck are you talking about, sir? You know? So that was epic. And so they assigned me a 50 cal, I think, pig. They called it the pig. And my job was to build bridges and then blow them up behind me. I don't even remember what it was called. Honestly, I didn't want to be there. I didn't give a fuck about any of this stuff. My mom forced me into the military. So they were going to send me to the Ozarks for basic training, but only for a very short period of time, because they actually wanted me to go to this program at Quantico to learn to design satellites. Now, if you follow my channel, you know about me and the eye in the sky, but not that eye in the sky, the one in a triangle, right? So that is really, really weird. Also, later on in my life, I was told by a Native American chief who passed away a few years ago named Golden Light Eagle that I would be a builder of the Rainbow Bridge, and I was a bridge builder in the military. And then one day I looked up my Enneagram number in Gurdjieff's book, and I was a bridge builder again. So it's like this weird thing of building bridges, you know. And I realized also that I'm always talking about building, you know, communication between the subconscious and conscious mind, building another bridge, and then how that builds a bridge between your internal world and your external world. So it's all these bridges all the time. So that's some crazy weirdness. It was also a number 6, a devil's advocate, which is really just the perfect thing. So bunch of weirdness there. So they wanted me to go to this, like, you know, elite technological training camp at the CIA place in Quantico and learn to build satellites, which they told me would be, you know, worth as much as 7 figures in the private sector lately. So it's a really good opportunity to go get military training, to go do some hypersensitive, top secret technical shit. In fact, a friend of mine in that area had a friend that got a job at the NSA working for the director. And she said that he called her into the room one time and he said, you know, here, hold this joystick. And she said it was kind of similar to like a Nintendo or PlayStation joystick. And he said, you know, push this button and then do this. And she said it zoomed in first to the earth, and then it zoomed in to a car. And then he said, push this, and it zoomed into a letter on the license plate. And then he informed her that she was playing with like a $5 billion satellite. So I know they've had technology like that since at least like 1997. By the way, it was around this time that I exchanged my first email ever in my life, I think 1997. And it was with Terrence McKenna. I was at my friend's house, who was the son of the CEO of Mobile, and he had had a stroke, so he had to retire early. And I didn't know what email was, and I wanted to go to Palenque to this conference that Terrence was having. And mind you, he wasn't that famous yet. I mean, he was getting to be well known, but he wasn't like this legendary status that he has now. It was more like a small cult following. So he said, why don't you just email him? And I was like, what the fuck is email? And he just looked at me like, you know, are you stupid? And I'm like, no, I'm just poor. You know, we don't have a computer in my mom's house, you know. So he brought me into the great room, and we found Terrence's email. I believe I also saw the pilot for South Park at that same session. I don't think I'd ever been on the internet before. And, you know, it had been around since 92 or 93, I think, but I had never used it. You know, that wall between the poverty mentality and everyone else, you know, computers, internet, cell phones, all stuff for rich people. I still had that mentality when I was in my like 30s, you know, to a large extent. It took me a long time to really override all that stuff, or even understand that I needed to and that I could. But yeah, so he found his email address, and I sent him an email. And a few days later, his mom came out of the great room, and she said, "Harley, there's a message from someone, TM." And both of us, our eyes just bugged out, like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. Did he really answer me?" And I had sent him this crazy long, letter saying, I'm, 17 years old, and I'm way into psychedelics and all of this stuff. And I'd babbled about all the things I wanted to talk to him about. And I said, I'd really like to come to Palenque, but I don't really have any money. So I don't see how it could happen. And, I didn't know how to get a passport. I didn't know what a passport was, I'm sure. My mom had literally never mentioned a passport. To this day, I didn't get a passport until I needed to come to Ecuador. So I was like 38 when I got a passport for the first time. I've had a bank account for maybe 6 months in my entire life. Only had a regular job where you punch in, a few as a teenager. And then for a few years, I guess I was a glazier. I've never had a utility in my name to this day. No lease ever. Yeah. So didn't know anything about all any of that stuff. Still don't really. Not exactly 100% sure what a mortgage is. Pretty sure it has something to do with buying a house, right? But yeah, he answered me and said, if you can just get here, then you can come for free. So he was going to waive the admission and let me come for free. But of course, I had that mentality that I was poor and I couldn't do something like go to Mexico because in my mind, only rich people could travel internationally. And it was just this thing that was off limits to somebody like me, Of course, that bugs the shit out of me to this day to realize I probably only would have needed, it's not like I didn't have money either. I had, stacks of money all the time, but it's like those things, there was this weird psychological block that I just couldn't assimilate. The normal people stuff was somehow off limits to me. I don't know that I've really overridden that to this day. I don't know that I want to, as part of it. But yeah, true story. Terrence McKenna is the first person that I ever exchanged an email with, and he was very kind to me to offer to let me come to his retreat at Palenque free of charge. So huge regret there. But so what I was saying about the moped, my mom forced me into the military. I guess we got to that point. They wanted me to go design satellites, and it was the reason I didn't want to do it more than anything was that the boot camp was going to be 2 years. And so I actually opted out of that and said, no, send me to the Ozarks. But then I just got off the bus, hitchhiked back to DC, and just literally got on the subway and went into DC. And I had no plan. I had no money. I had just gone AWOL from the military. Well, thank you, City Global. And by the way, you guys, please do send support to the chat if you appreciate this content. YouTube is not very friendly to me, so I really do appreciate the support. If you guys don't support me, I don't get anything for all these hours I put into this. Just got shocked like hell by this microphone for some reason. But yeah, the story's about to get crazier because I just wandered into DC. And this guy with a streak of purple hair, for some reason, I just ran into him right away, within hours. And he's like, oh, you can stay at my apartment. So I was like, wow, crazy. I have a place to live already. And I went to his apartment, and there was 30 fucking different species of nasty looking insects on the wall in this cloud. There must have been something on the wall because there was this spot where they were all collected. And there was all sorts of shit. It wasn't just roaches. It was all kinds of stuff. And he was gone already. I got a job immediately at a hair salon, washing hair for gay dudes. And this is where the doorway into the elite Washington, DC cocaine circle opened for me. because I was a relatively attractive 17-year-old kid. And I was very popular, long blonde hair, and Santiago, the hairdresser, just fell in love with me. He was always telling me that I'm in love with you. He was one of the only people too that really crossed the line one time. I was asleep at his house and I woke up and he had accessed my unit and had it in his mouth, and I was not real happy about that. But aside from that, honestly, I didn't really have too many problems. People were pretty respectful. I was actually surprised because I was coming from a very Christian, racist, homophobic, conservative, Southern upbringing and environment and attitude. So I was expecting them to be a lot worse than they actually were. But immediately, I had pure cocaine and didn't really have to pay for it because I was washing people's hair and they would tip me. It was an upscale salon, $100 with cocaine in the middle, trying to flirt with me and stuff, So, I was like washing hair at a gay salon that's like right away I got that job. It was the craziest thing. But so then I would be awake on cocaine all the time. And I remember I was in that guy's apartment one night. And Marilyn Manson's Antichrist Superstar had just come out, and I had been awake for 2 days probably, and I took a shower after listening to the entire CD. And there was nothing really more disturbing. I had candles burning and the bugs crawling around everywhere and Marilyn Manson playing. And I didn't know there was a hidden track on the CD. So I've been awake for 2 days. I go take a shower, I come out, and the CD is suddenly the player turns to 99, it says. And I see it happen. And then I hear this voice come out of the speakers saying, "When all of your dreams have been fulfilled, all of your wishes will have been destroyed." Over and over again in this twisted demonic voice. And I seriously thought it was like possessed or something because no one knew about hidden tracks. It was the first time I'd encountered that. And that was really insane. So I was pretty young and I started doing too many drugs for sure. This went on for only about a year and a half, I think. But it was pretty intense. The first major incident, I think I stayed awake for 13 days on methamphetamine. And I went to this park, Malcolm X Park, with this girl on the 13th night. And I was looking out into this lake kind of thing. It's not a lake. It was like a park with, they have like water, like rectangles with water and like a plant or something in them. Just, I don't know what to call it. Water park decoration shit. And so this old man like grew up out of this like lily pad looking affair. And he had like a dead baby in his hand and it turned blue and started rotting and then I looked at the next plant, the next water plant, and some horrific scene grew up out of that and it went around the whole thing. And then so I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing this drug anymore. So that was good because I decided after that one bender that methamphetamine was not fun. That was pretty horrific. The sleep deprivation that occurs because of that is not good. But then I met a girl whose name I am going to withhold because I think she has a normal life now and I don't want to take any chances of causing her any kind of issues. But I moved into a row house with this guy, Seamus, who he was green. And he would pick like rotting teeth chunks out of his teeth with a cocaine spoon and like flick them across the room and giggle about it. Sometimes like perched on his chair. It was insane. And you couldn't really understand anything he said. He just done so many drugs that you just couldn't understand him when he spoke. Wasn't exactly slurring. It's like really hard to describe the kind of nerve damage, I think, that resulted in this weird thing that had happened to him. But he was an incredible guy. You know, he would like help everyone out all the time. He would get robbed all the time because he would fall asleep with all of his drugs and money all around him in some party house, and people would just take everything, and he'd wake up and everything's gone. But people really loved him, so he had big connections. They'd put him back on and give him a bunch more stuff to go out and try to make it right and whatever. And so he fronted me my first little bit of cocaine because I had nothing. I was like starving in the basement of this row house, and I had only eaten a honey bun in like 48 hours or something. And so I asked this girl who was a call girl to go up and ask Seamus to front me an 8-ball. I didn't think he was going to do it. By the way, this was the basement of a crack house where someone had been executed, and they didn't bother to clean it up, the cops. So there was like a little bit of like skull and brain on the wall in the basement. It was incredibly ghetto. It was insane. But you know, I needed to be somewhere, and he did it. He fronted me that 8-ball, and I went out to the gay bars because he told me, look, just do not go on the street. Do not go where there are straight people. The cops don't want to be sent to the gay bars. They think that they all have AIDS, and they're terrified of it. You know, this AIDS was like a bigger deal then. So there are no cops in the gay bars, and it was a total free-for-all. So the first night I flipped the 8-ball, and then I had a 1/4 ounce, and then I just kept bigger, really, really fast. And, you know, because they all loved me, they were all flirting with me, they all wanted to talk to me. In fact, I got so busy at my table where I worked that they started calling my table the owner's box. So there was the bar where you'd buy drinks, and then there was the owner's box where you'd buy cocaine, and I would just do it right over the table. Like, it didn't even matter. I wore a trench coat in the colder months that had a bunch of hidden pockets everywhere, and I would just keep like different sized bags in different pockets, and then weapons also concealed. I actually kept a sawed-off shotgun. There was an inner pocket where you could reach in and grab the shotgun and pull it out of my pocket. And so one time a crackhead tried to rob me, and I literally pulled a shotgun out of my pocket. Like, you should have seen his face. It was fucking awesome. Just like a scene out of a movie, you know. Literally just, it looked like I pulled a shotgun out of my pocket, like some nightmare magic trick or something. So at first I was just working with Seamus, and it was all pretty innocent relative to what was about to happen. And remember, you know, I'm still like 17 years old. I'm definitely not even an adult yet. And, I guess, you know, I met the girl and moved in with her, and she had been seeing Seamus. So that was the end of that. I didn't even realize that until the other day, honestly. It never occurred to me that he was mad that I had taken his girlfriend. But he just suddenly wasn't around. So I needed another connection. And my girlfriend's brother, it turned out my girlfriend's dad was JFK's lawyer at the time that he was assassinated, which is pretty goddamn crazy. And her brother was like a computer whiz that was also like a pretty high level cocaine dealer. So he was making like $250 an hour. Uh-oh, did we lose the internet? He was making like $250 an hour and selling cocaine. So, you know, his parties, E-Bunny, we called him. It's his birthday, so he's laying up against the, is my internet going crazy? He's laying up against the couch and just saying, E-Bunny wants more E. And before it was over, we had popped 33 ecstasy pills into his mouth over the course of the night. So, you know, just really, really crazy upscale money everywhere. But then I was at this guy Charney's house, and Charney was a gay art dealer with a yellow Ferrari, and he knew a lot of people. He knew of after parties where people like one night Quentin Tarantino was there. I'm not going to name some of the other people, but I know Quentin Tarantino's kind of a dirtbag, so I don't really care about putting dirt on him. And we're just about to the point where I'm going to stop the story for now, and we're going to pick it up another night. But partly because I want to bury this part about Ted Cruz a little bit. I'm a little bit nervous about putting this out on YouTube, just because I don't know if it could cause me problems or not. But so Charney knew people, and one night I was at his apartment, and man, what a cast of characters. Jesus. There was this one dude, he was a black guy. He had silver like irises somehow. They weren't contacts. He had silver irises. A doctor had given him AIDS, and he had sued the doctor, and he apparently did it on purpose. And he got a ton of money. There's super weird people. I'm not going to go into all the details, but in completely crazy cast of characters. And so there was one guy there that was really out of place, and his name was Malik, and he had a little guy with him named Drama. They went to Howard University, and at this time, Puffy Combs was also going to Howard University. Big difference there. I actually learned from them, because Puffy had previously been part of their crew, that the reason they started calling him Puffy is not because he smoked a lot of weed, but because he puffed his chest out in the locker room because he was little, and he wanted people to think that he was a lot bigger than he was. So, he's just puffing his chest out. So that's how he got the nickname Puffy. And they also said that he was a rat, that he got busted and ratted Drama out, and Leaf and Drama were his two sidekicks. And so Malik was about 350 pounds of midnight black man with brands. The gang that he was in, they didn't do tattoos, they branded you. And so it's a very dull knife, and they get it hot, and they carve so the scar tissue like buckles up and makes this, scar tattoo. And it was the Greek symbol, Alpha and Omega. It was the Omega symbol for the end, and his crew would always have I'm getting past the introduction, right? So they're at this weird gay art party, and I'm like, what is this guy doing here? It totally out of place, terrifying, obviously real as it gets, legit gangster. And he's in the bathroom, and he noticed that I didn't quite mix either. I was like almost more on his wavelength or something. And he's like, yo, man, come here. And he called me into the bathroom, and he's like, try this. And he put some cocaine on a surface. I don't know what it was. And it was incredibly pure. And then I understood why he was there. And so he gave me his number. And I needed a connection. So I called him when I got home in a couple days, because that's how that went at the time. I woke up at 10 o'clock at night, by the way, for like a year and a half. I didn't see the sun. It actually made me feel sick to get the sun on my skin, because I had not been out in the daytime for so long that by the time I actually went back out into the daylight sun, it made me feel sick to be exposed to it. I would close all the, if like the blinds were open, I would close them. I hated getting it in my eyes and stuff. And so I called him, and he came over with a bunch of his boys, covered in golden diamonds, white Mercedes, bulletproof windows. In DC, they have rentals with bulletproof windows for diplomats and stuff. So the big drug dealers will rent those cars with the diplomat security features. And so that's what he had. And he comes in with this other dude, and I'm expecting an ounce, maybe half an ounce, something. I should have known better, because this dude is obviously high level, not like street level. And he comes in, and he's got this brown bag in his hand, this big grocery bag, like brown paper bag, but not a lunch bag, like a grocery sized one. And he walks to the back of the room, and he just sets it on the air conditioner, and he says, and gives me the price, whatever it was. And I didn't think too much of it, because, $23 an 8-ball is a little bit cheaper than I was expecting. I think it was something insane like that, or $23 a gram when I worked it out, because it was such a large quantity. And he goes, I'll be back for my money on Friday. And I was like, real quick, shit, it's Wednesday, you know? I didn't have a clientele for that. And you know, the 10 crack commandments, if you ain't got the clientele, say hell no, because they gonna want their money come rain, hell, sleet, snow, right? So I was definitely not stoked about that. And on his way out the door, he stops and he turns around and looks at me and he goes, by the way, I'll kill ninjas for free that kill ninjas for me for free. But he didn't say the word ninja, just to let your imagination fill in the blanks. Actually, he made me refer to him using that word. I got my card from that guy, basically, one day. We were sitting around smoking a blunt, passing it around the room, and I said, hey, man, pass me that blunt. And they all just looked at me like, dude, what is this? And he's like, man, what color is my skin? And I knew what was coming. You know, I was horrified. Because in the 90s, man, the whole politically correct thing had just started to really, get intense. And he just stared at me and waited for me to address him properly. So after, 30 seconds of like waiting for this moment to pass and everyone to just start talking and pass, when it didn't happen, I did it. I rephrased the phrase and told him, will you pass the blunt, ninja? Like ready to like duck, but thinking like I don't have bulletproof armor on, so it's not really going to matter. And he was just like, all right. And he handed me the blunt and they acted like nothing had happened. And that was how it was from then on out. And the whole neighborhood, that's just, I was one of the boys all of a sudden, which is, super weird. And whenever my friends for Fairfax would come and visit me, the kids I went to high school with, sometimes they would be there. And the first time that happened, and I said that to these guys in front of these white kids from the suburbs, they're like ready to duck behind the furniture and shit. It was great to menace my friends with that kind of terror. But yeah, so once again, I found myself up to my eyeballs in deep, deep dookies. And so from there, it only escalated. And I guess now it's getting to be my son's bedtime and the rest of this shit is not kid friendly at all. So I didn't want to have to start this story in this place because it's a hell of a place to just start a stream without any context. But they're here now. So I guess that's what's going to have to happen in part 2. So thank you guys for spending this time with me. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And, hang in there. I know it's all been really gnarly, but eventually it takes a huge turn and goes in a completely different direction, obviously. But I guess this story needs to be told for whatever reason. Once again, I really do appreciate your likes, shares, subscribes, join Patreon, and support us through the options in the chat. And I will see you all again. Probably we'll wait a week or so to do part 2. Give me some time to regrow some skin after this. But we'll get back into it sooner than later. Cheers.